Right, now this here is not something that I was planning on making a video on this week, but while I was making the last video, I was searching on eBay for prices and bits of B-roll to use, and came across an X99 Intel gaming bundle that cost me around £45. Just straight up buy it now. Very little information, a couple of pictures. I didn't even read the specifications because immediately I knew the motherboard's worth more than that, and if it works, well, it's paid for itself. So I have no idea what to expect, but this is meant to be a complete gaming bundle. It's one of those ones again, and this time it could actually be surprisingly good, but I have no clue what we're actually getting. So why don't we get this thing open? I've never had the chance to dabble around with X99 yet. I have got some X99 bits planned, but it was all cheap bits from China. So if this works, we actually have a point to compare to for that video later on. I don't know how this has been packaged. It was very cheap. All the tape is on this side. Oh, has this survived? Cardboard, this is just cardboard and a thin layer of bubble wrap. Yeah, there's dents in the top as well. Chunky looking graphics card. What is meant to be the X99 setup. I wasn't expecting a graphics card of any sort, but always nice to get one as a bonus in these bundles. The question is, what do we want to start with? I say we open this first, because this is the part I actually saw. So I think this is meant to be an ASUS motherboard and some sort of X99 processor, which in itself for £45, not a bad deal when you consider that that's about what you'd spend on a set from China these days. There's not really any bubble left in the bubble wrap. I mean, it doesn't look too bad at the moment. So there is in fact an X99 board here. What processor have we got? An i7 5820K? Oh, X99 knowledge. That was 6-core 12-thread at nearly Zen 2 IPC. It's an alright looking motherboard. Okay, this may have survived. Was there no I/O shield? Did I miss something? Maybe it's in here. So we've got a 6-core Intel X99 setup. If that works, it's covered the costs. This I have no idea. Knowing my luck, this is probably going to be a Terascale flagship. It looks modern. Is there any backplate in there? No. What is this? It is, in fact, an RX 580. 4GB version, but not the easiest thing in the world to see, but you can just about make out some water damage down on these pins. Can you see where it's sort of gone bluey green? That doesn't inspire me with confidence. That alone is worth nearly 40 quid. I suppose all we can do is plug this in, see if it turns on. I don't own any X99 coolers. I usually keep a stock of generic coolers up here that would work, but I've given away the last of them because my generosity knows no bounds, apparently. Don't get onboard display, so we're going to need a graphics card. I don't want to use that one just yet. But let's go plug this thing in. Update. I was going through the box as I was about to crush it up and put it in the bin, and found another package. There is, in fact, an I/O shield in this. Any of our channel members will know that I absolutely love getting these cheap power supplies from China because they actually work. So RAM, we can just use my Corsair kit from my actual PC, but it's quad channel. So we can't take advantage of quad channel at the moment because I don't have enough DDR4, and the last set I got sent from CEX were duds. Because hey, if this works, we might be getting a dedicated X99 video. Oh, what's that noise? Why is it making a grindy noise when it goes in? Cooler. I have nothing. This is a great idea, I definitely recommend. Definitely nick a Ryzen cooler. This is heavy enough that it will just weigh itself down. Right, now this setup isn't ideal by any stretch of the imagination, but it should be good enough. Make sure this all works. I mean, for the price we paid, let's be honest, £45 for a Polaris graphics card and a 6-core Intel setup, I can definitely excuse myself buying some X99 testing bits if this all works. Right, what do we need? Right, cheap graphics card that can give a display, first of all. Do I have a box to put this on? Random adapter. That's plugged in, that's all working, that's all good. If this just works, it does go to show there are bargains to be had. Well, I got lucky with this. This was just listed. Literally, minutes after this was listed, I bought it. I don't think anyone's really going to argue with that. Moment of truth. Does this part of it actually work? This is actually a fancy motherboard that has just a push button. Okay, the cooler's on. Please have worked. Oh, we have a E5 error. RAM problem. The stick that was being weird. It better not have killed my RAM because I can't afford any more. Is this too much RAM? Do I have any smaller capacity RAM? I really don't have much DDR4, but this one is for a 6th gen system and is a single 8 gig stick. So we've got the E5 error. We do also have jumpers on this board though. Easy XMP is enabled. What if we disable XMP? Some people are going to be chiming in saying, oh, you didn't know this, you didn't know that. I have never dabbled in X99. Check for bent pins. There are a lot of pins. Okay, it's not bent pins. In many ways, that's both a good and bad thing, because if it was bent pins, we know what to look for. Have I got any more RAM? I don't know. If this isn't the most boring stick of RAM anyone has ever seen, I don't know what is. Okay, I think it just posted. Lots of post codes. I'm going to turn it off and then insert a graphics card. Very boring graphics card. Because of course this is what we have to do. We finally buy something modern and powerful, and it only works with the worst stick of RAM I've ever seen, and we can't even use the graphics card it came with yet. But let's see, does this actually work? The graphics card just made a noise. There's lots of bleeping and blooping happening. All we need to see is a signal. It's doing more than it was doing before. We're getting so many post codes. Oh, it's on. That took a while. Okay, maybe it's memory speed that's causing us the problem. It's working at the moment with 8 gigs of DDR4 clocked at 2133 megahertz. Now that's on, do we want to plug in the Radeon? I'm going to see what it does first. I'm going to just plug it in. If it doesn't work, we can clean it. I'm going to clean off that little bit of corrosion first. This is not the video I had in mind at all, but I'm hoping a little bit of this will just clean up the contacts just a little bit, just make it so it's not covered in corrosion. Yeah, there we go. That's just brushing clean off. What if we just try with some higher capacity amount of RAM now? What if we know this stick works. Take that one out. That's our one that works. We have a working slot that we know works. Can it work with a modern 16 gigabyte stick? Immediately goes to a 53 error. I found another stick. It's Samsung. Yeah, that one has also given us a 53 error code. That's all my DDR4. This is all the DDR4 I own. And we have one stick it'll actually work with. That's fine, that's fine. That's at least proof of concept. I have heard that X99 can be exceptionally picky. This is the one stick it wants to work with. That's it. It is those 4 chips on a bit of PCB. I mean, to be fair, a working X99 setup, I don't have enough RAM on hand to be able to test more than this. Right, let's just double check this works, and then we'll see if this is a lot of graphics card. Is the corrosion cleaned up? Yeah, the corrosion's cleaned up beautifully, actually. That's looking a lot better. Yep, okay, we do get a post signal. That's all good. Does this work is the next question. I mean, to be fair, it's running an old BIOS. I wonder if there's updates for this available. Oh yeah, there's some rust build up on here. Hey, who knows? I've seen graphics cards worse than this managed to pull through. So, X99 board, working. One stick of DDR4, works. Does the RX580 do anything? It's got blue lights on it, this one. Oh, if this works, this is a good bundle. I'll take artifacting. It works. Okay, well, we don't know if it works with drivers. Let's just recap real quick. This bundle cost us £45. The board is picky about RAM, but that just could be X99. We have a 6-core Intel Core i7, the X99 ASUS board, a working Sapphire RX 580 at the moment, we don't know how long it will last, all for £45. Now, yes, I'm not exactly equipped for testing this stuff. Does it matter? Even in this jank form, that is a lot of power given how little we've spent. So I suppose we try and whack an operating system on this, see if we can update the BIOS, and then we go from there. Because, I mean, look at it. Look at this setup. Is this not a magnificent and majestic bundle of gaming parts for £45? I think it is. I'm gonna try and install Windows on here, see if it's stable. Then we're gonna get a baseline score, see if we can update the BIOS, see if we can add more RAM, tweak things around and see what, for 45 quid, just exactly what this can do, because I have no idea. I've been hearing lots of good things about X99 in recent times. It's actually staying relatively cool. Right, there we go. So now if we restart, it does take a long time to post. Then again, it also has a lot of things to check on. It is quite an advanced board. I don't really have much working space here right now. There we go. Lots of cables going everywhere. Windows 10 IoT. We've got the i7 5820K. 6 cores with hyperthreading at 3.3 gigahertz. It is registering 8 gigs of RAM. I have no idea what the last thing we ran on here was, but we are going to go ahead and install the latest AMD drivers, because that could be our downfall at this point. So far, I mean, it's been a pain, and I've probably edited this down a lot more than what it's taken me to get to this point, but at the same time, it is working. This is a 580, a rather high-end Nitro version with the RGB on top as well. I have some monitoring tools on here. I have no idea how good these are. I need to get some baseline scores so I've got an idea of how to place these. I think off the top of my head, from what I remember, these sort of rival a Ryzen 7 3600, which is, you know, a good processor. Of course, those have XFR2. Here we would have to manually overclock these to match that level of performance, something I don't think we'll be doing today. We can always have a go overclocking, I suppose. £10 now? I don't think they're very expensive. How expensive is this i7? Either around a tenner up to 40 quid. Our last BIOS was 2017. I mean, we are limited by the fact that we're running single channel RAM on a quad channel designed board where it destroys Sandy Bridge. Do any of these cover memory? BIOS 3801, is that by any chance what we're running? Okay, we are running the one that apparently improved DRAM stability. We can give it a go. I mean, if it does let us run more RAM, it's something, isn't it? It's just an extra point that we've got going for us. I'm glad we're running the IoT version of Windows because a single 8 gig stick that looks that sad, it's not ideal for X99 by any stretch of the imagination. Now, this is not the type of thing I'd recommend people go out and try and do. I mean, even at the moment, I can tell you that, because 4-part X99 setups that are going to be notoriously finicky, even when they work properly, the last thing you want is one that has probably been, I mean, they were left in storage, the graphics card is water damaged, this has weird RAM stability problems because even a working 8GB decent stick is apparently too much, but this random crucial one is apparently okay. Definitely more of a risk on the enthusiast side compared to just buying a standard Haswell setup, something a bit more normal, which as we've seen have been absolutely fine. This is just throwing yourself in at the deep end for seemingly no reason. Now, this is the moment where we find out if it does work. But we'll restart it, we'll give it a chance, we'll see if maybe it did install those drivers. Well, the monstrosity has installed drivers. I refuse to believe that this has all worked with a minimal amount of effort. Yeah, it's not even running hot, the fans aren't even on. RX 580, Ellesmere, 14nm. Yeah, it's only the 4GB version, but if anything, we looked at the 4GB RX 480 and it was fine. So I think our plan is run 3D Mark, find out how it performs at baseline, see if it survives. Seeing if it survives is probably the most crucial part. 2, update the BIOS, see if we can get more RAM in here. If we can't, we'll try and make up for it with a big old processor overclock. Then we'll just tweak the system around and see what it can do. I mean, this is unbelievably high-end tech for what we've paid. I mean, sure, the graphics card is beat up and dented and has water damage and rust. Sure, the board refuses to work with most of my sticks of RAM, but come on, for this price range, you're nearing in on AMD Zen performance without having to spend all too much money on it. I mean, Zen would probably be a bit of a better idea, given that X99 is cool, but definitely has its teething problems that are still there long after the teething problem should have stopped. But I can't really argue with it. I can't. So nothing is optimal here. We have the X99 board that don't like working properly. We've got the processor running at its stock clocks. The graphics card is half powered by this janky mess off a cheap enough power supply. They are good power supplies, so I'm not worried too much about that. Nothing about this is good, but let's see if it can actually get a good score. I cannot believe this is working. I was fully expecting this to be one of those videos where I mostly just get bits and pieces out of it for parts that I can reuse in the future. It's happened quite a few times where you take a risk on bundles like this, you get maybe the first 10 minutes of a video, and then it just simply refuses to work. So we're just winging it now. We're just going with it, the fact that this all seems to have actually come together and survived. I wonder if the RAM compatibility is why they got rid of it. They saw some rust on the graphics card, they couldn't get this to boot because the RAM was unstable, and didn't think, well, maybe just didn't have any other RAM on hand to test with. I mean, look at the prices. Would you have spare RAM on hand? I don't. Okay, Time Spy performance is looking really rather solid at the moment. Right, graphics tests have all gone well. How is our processor holding up? Is that getting... Oh, it is getting a little bit toasty. Yeah, I'm not used to seeing the physics score run this well unless I'm seeing it on my own actual computer. Is X99 the answer to all our problems? I mean, I was mostly going to say, yeah, the Chinese sets look cool, but this is an actual proper ASUS setup, and we're seeing pretty good results. Well, we've scored over the average for this combo, which is really quite bad for how the average person is running their setup. Look at this mess. and tell me this is above average. Our graphics card tops out at 64 degrees. Did they ever use this? I mean, it looks pretty new, but it's running fine. Our processor, on the other hand, barely tops 44 degrees. So, BIOS update, tweak it around, overclock if we can, run it through again, and we are good to see what this can do. X99 from, this one is 2019. It's 2 years newer. This is taking a very, very long time, actually. Okay, it did actually do it. Is it gonna post again? Please post. It's not doing anything. Oh, bugger. Come on. Maybe it's just feeling a bit slow. Oh, it's doing weird things there. We'll just turn itself off and on again rapidly. Oh, it's good. Oh. Okay, yep, 2019, it did update itself. That was doing some strange things. I hate updating BIOSes, especially on boards that don't seem the most stable. Right, I'm going to enable XMP if we can, and then we're going to try increasing the amount of RAM in the system again. Right, let's see if it feels happy running dual channels. Dual channels 16 gigs. I can live with that. Nope, I believe that's given us a RAM error again. These are 16s, which I think are too new for it. This one is an 8. So if it works with that one, it works. These are the 3 we know work with it. That one is also a no. This is the exact same as this one and has not worked at all. I mean, it fucking works. Now, of course it works. Nothing makes sense. Watch me plug in 16 gigs and it's just going to work now, I guarantee it. We've now got a pile of 4 sticks that work. If I now plug in 16 gigs, I'm dying. I'm giving up. I'm giving up. Was that actually the... If it goes through to the BIOS, I've got no words. 16 gig stick. Yeah, it works fine now. I've changed nothing. I've done nothing. I've changed nothing.
I've healed the PC.
You literally have healed it. Right, so I've gone through and found more RAM to test, and I don't know. I've got nothing. It now boots with 16 gig sticks. Do we try and put in another 16 gig stick? Is this what X99 is about? Just adding in RAM constantly until it stops working, and then going back and doing it all over again, because that's currently all I've been doing. I believe that is now posted on 32 gigs of RAM. Out of all of this, these are all 8 gig sticks that it will also work with now, apparently. So that's another 32 gigs there, but I don't think I've got enough RAM to actually do complete quad channel. So what we'll do is we will just run dual channel today. If we do an actual video revisiting the i7-5820K or anything X99, I will buy more RAM for quad channel. I'm stumped. I got nothing. I got no idea what to do. So we're just gonna run with this. It was this cursed RGB stick that I've owned for years. I plugged it in and then all of this RAM just started working again. There's no reason. Right, there we go. DDR4, dual channel, 32 gigs. It's running at 2666 megahertz. That's fine. This is not a comprehensive X99 setup video because I want to do something like that. This is just a, what is this set of parts and why does it work? They've got the extreme overclocking options. We aren't dabbling with those today. This is not an extreme overclocking setup. Maybe I've been incredibly lazy, but the way I've done this is I've purely just increased the turbo clocks. I have had to tone back the overclock a little bit. I mean, I'm not going to spend forever dabbling around because this is not a good overclocking setup here right now. But we got a decent score, at least in CPU-Z. That's a sizable uplift, and it's keeping itself okay in terms of thermals. For the graphics cards, I'm going to be lazy. I am going to be very lazy. It's set up pretty decently out of the box, but at the same time it is a Polaris graphics card, so easiest way to deal with this, whack an undervolt on there. All we're going to do, click custom, increase our power limit up to the maximum, go to our GPU clocks, go down to our voltages. It'll probably do 1100 across the board, so we're just going to tone it down a little bit, which is only a 50 millivolt undervolt. We are going to try and run Linux on this later, so don't worry, there's some Windows testing coming up, but this is a lot of computer for the money. Definitely not for the entry-level user, but for someone that's a bit more familiar with computers. You can't really go wrong with this, to be honest, can you? I mean, it's gonna do everything you need and more with no problems whatsoever. So far it's been running absolutely fine. It's running cooler, I can tell the graphics card is. Processor's not exactly getting crazy hot because we're only giving it a few extra 100 megahertz now, to be honest. Dual channel will also be helping substantially. Okay, you know what? That's looking pretty good. So yeah, we are pretty much exactly the same on the graphics card. As I said, Sapphire set these up pretty well out of the factory, but by running in dual channel, increasing the turbo clock slightly and removing Spectre and Meltdown, that is around, what, 800 points higher? That's a good processor score from something we picked up for 45 quid. And it's still not exactly getting hot. Even with this janky setup, it's hitting 60 degrees. Yep, the main thing we've improved over in the world of the Radeon is just the stability. It was pretty good out of the box, but now it is a completely flat line. I am going to stress test this now though, and hopefully we can get into some real benchmarking. Right, so just to quickly recap on this entire situation, what's happened is I went to get some B-roll, came across some cheap parts that had just been listed as spares or repairs likely due to water damage given the state of them, and we have finally managed to get them all working. One of our main issues was RAM, because even a BIOS update didn't solve stability, and we just couldn't get anything to work. Given that it would only work with a single channel 8GB stick from Crucial, which genuinely is the most basic stick of RAM I've ever seen, it became quite apparent that something was definitely wrong. Now, whether it's just inserting and removing multiple sticks of RAM has cleaned up the slots enough, but the one turning point seemed to be putting in a very funky stick of Crucial RGB RAM that I've owned for years. It's only an 8GB stick, but that for some reason worked, and then after this, every other stick of RAM I tried now mysteriously worked on the system. There is no answer to this. There is nothing specific I did or special I've done. This is likely one of the reasons this board was sold as spares or repairs, given that if they did get it to post, it wasn't posting with very many sticks of RAM at all, likely leading people to believe it was broken. But yeah, honestly, I spent a full day troubleshooting this board, trying to get it to work with high capacity bits of RAM, and for some reason putting in a weird RGB stick was the turning point. Can I explain it? No, it's likely damaged components, but for some reason it's brought it back to life and everything is working. So just what is the overall value of the parts that we've bought? Well, a broken X99 bundle like this generally goes for around what I paid. It was $34.99 for a processor by itself, and that's available on eBay, buy it now, and doesn't seem to be anything irregular. If you were looking at getting a working set of parts, which I suppose you could say is what we have here, they sell for around £95, or in and around this mark if you're buying one on an auction. So we've definitely made some money there now the board has brought itself back to life. In terms of the graphics card, the 4GB RX 580 is weirdly in demand at the moment, likely because all the 8GB ones have been bought up at this point, but I've seen them selling anywhere from £30 to £50. Yes, ours was water damaged and untested, but after a quick clean, it's been working absolutely fine. So in total, on the high end, we've got £150 worth of parts. If you were being a bit more realistic and going with auctions and, used broken options, well, as we've just seen, we pretty much paid bang on what you'd expect. Now, I did take a risk doing this, as I was expecting this to turn into one of those videos where I don't get anything out of it, especially given the high-end value of these parts, but you know what? Sometimes you do get lucky. Now, despite this being relatively good value, now we know it is all working, what exactly was included in our £45 X99 Intel gaming bundle? Well, we did get the Intel Core i7 5820K, which is definitely still a formidable processor with 6 cores and 12 threads at around 3.3 to 3.4 GHz. You do get turbo boosting, which is something I've set up, and I have removed Spectre Meltdown to claw back an extra bit of performance. Our graphics card is the legendary AMD RX 580, however is the lesser 4GB model. It's nothing too bad, we did test a similar version to this card last year, and it performs okay right up until you hit that VRAM wall, but you can still tweak your way around it. We are running with 32GB of DDR4 RAM that we've borrowed out of my actual personal PC, but then again that is the main downside to this. DDR4 RAM is expensive, I personally have very little of it on hand as you've just seen, but these boards, they can be picky with it. We've spent far too much time dabbling with RAM today, so that is something to keep in mind. I'm running it on a 240GB SSD that I've borrowed, and we do have a rather nice ASUS X99 motherboard. We're running Windows 10 IoT, and our cooling today is an AMD cooler plonked on top of the processor with no mounting done whatsoever. So yes, this is a peak janky setup. far too much power on the processor, a somewhat competent graphics card, and parts borrowed out of my personal computer. At the end of the day, as we've already discussed pricing-wise, you can take a chance on bundles like this from anywhere from £45 upwards, or a similar amount in dollars. Generally, when it comes to X99, it's such a scary platform with so many problems that most people, well, they don't really want to take the risk on it when they could just go and get a Chinese board that they know is going to work fine. I have also gone through and got our bundle of parts set up, at least as well as I can. We can't run quad channel today because I don't have enough RAM to fill in all the slots and do it properly. It would just run worse than dual channel. But by running it in dual channel, undervolting the graphics card, making sure everything is as optimal as I can get it today while it's running on top of a cardboard box, we saw that our processor benefited greatly from being set up with proper RAM and a slight increase to the turbo clocks. And to be fair, I have to give Sapphire credit here. These RX580s, they still use too much power out of the box, but you don't exactly gain anything back by undervolting, you just really gain efficiency and coolness. So I've undervolted the graphics card, we got a few extra points out of it and a bit more stability, but performance-wise, didn't really change. In terms of the power of this overall bundle, it absolutely destroys in Cloudgate and Firestrike, which is sort of, not really of its era, but before its time, and it does very well. We get passable performance in Time Spy and Steel Nomad Lite, so DirectX 12 entry-level games and things like that will run perfectly, but unfortunately with 4GB of VRAM, even this X99 bundle does struggle with things like Steel Nomad, where we simply haven't got enough VRAM for modern titles. Well, at least that's what the benchmarks would indicate. Now, I know people are going to want to know just how these individual components perform, and yes, we will take another look at them properly, but for the sake of looking at things today, already our Core i7-5820K is somewhere between a Ryzen 5 1600 and, well, quite a long ways off a 3700X, but it's a good performing processor that even on this janky box setup is beating first gen Ryzen, despite the fact we have nicked a first gen Ryzen cooler, but, you know, it's working pretty well here. In terms of our graphics card, it's an RX 580 4GB, and it performs like an RX 580 4GB. It's slightly better than a 1060, it's slightly below an R9 Fury. I've slotted it in on the graph, but let's be honest, in something like Time Spy, there's no real difference between the 4GB and the 8GB unless you're filling up the full VRAM bus. So yeah, performance across the board, we've got a killer processor and a pretty average bang in the middle modern day graphics card. But that would appear to be the system all set up and working, which seems astonishing. I really wasn't expecting to make it this far. I cannot reiterate enough that I took a chance on this purely because I thought maybe some bits of it could work. Maybe there's something we can get out of it. I thought the graphics card didn't look too bad, but an X99 setup for this cheap that actually does work. Yes, it's had its issues. Yes, it's taken a day of troubleshooting. No, I probably wouldn't recommend for an entry-level PC user to take a risk on something like this, but we've made it this far. We are ready. We have a working graphics card that is set up and undervolted. We have the processor running as good as I can get it to on this janky cardboard box setup, and I do want to know just how well it performs. Now, yes, we have borrowed RAM out of a system, and yes, DDR4 is expensive because we're talking, is around 30 quid for 16GB these days, but still, if you were to buy a setup like this, actually get it working, throw in 30 quid's worth of RAM, you have a setup that has 6 cores and 12 threads, you've got a Polaris graphics card with up-to-date drivers that you can set up nicely, and you have a system that should handle a lot of modern games. But we still have our limitations that are more than just the jank. We still have what is an older processor that's not exactly overclocked very high, and we only have 4GB of VRAM. So today, why don't we find out how this absolute abomination of a setup performs in the benchmarks. Starting things off, we have GTA 5 Enhanced Edition, which we were able to run with very high options enabled, but we did have to turn our textures down to just the high options. At the end of the day, we do have an RX 580, but it is unfortunately the 4GB version, and very high textures can sometimes be, well, just a little bit too much for the card. At the end of the day, our Core i7 was sat back doing very little, if I'm honest, as we saw a 64 FPS average and 1% lows down to 54 FPS, which is a great result here for a £45 bundle. Moving over to the world of online though, we did see our average drop slightly to 63 FPS, and our 1% lows suffer quite heavily with drops down to 46 FPS. I did try to remedy this because there was just something odd happening with the frame pacing here and I couldn't work out what it was. It could just be this janky setup, it could be GTA Online, but generally with the Enhanced Edition it's not often we see it performing like this. I capped the frame rate at 50 FPS, which did help things out substantially, but at the end of the day, it's a cheap setup and I'm glad that at least it was playable. Not that I want to spend too much time testing older titles given the amount of power in this hardware, but moving over to the legacy version of GTA 5 and we were able to run it with the Ultra settings, that's all of the options turned up to Ultra and all of the advanced options turned on as well, with AMD CHS shadows enabled, to show that in those sort of 2015 era games, you are looking at Ultra settings and 60 FPS with no problems. At the end of the day, even with this basic setup on the Core i7, yes we were putting some quite high load on Core 0 and Core 1, but at the same time, we were seeing 60 FPS and the RX 580, even being 4GB here, isn't too much of a problem given this is the older release that is less VRAM heavy. In terms of going over into the world of GTA Online Legacy, well, it never does perform as good as the GTA Enhanced Edition does, which is likely why that exists. We saw our average return 46 FPS here, with 1% lows down to 39 FPS. Generally, it hover in and around 40 to 50 FPS most of the time, but it really depended on what was happening. Utilization was all over the place, especially on our graphics card. So it'll run fine, but GTA Online Legacy is still a complete and utter mess. But this is really quite an important question. Could you take your £45 Intel X99 bundle, which you've spent all day setting up, and play some Counter-Strike 2 on it? Well, with competitive settings, which is low everything and then dynamic shadows enabled, we returned 237 FPS throughout the built-in benchmark, with 1% lows down to 179 FPS, which overall was a fantastic result. However, this benchmark does take place in Dust 2, which is significantly less VRAM heavy than say something like Nuke, because if we go into a more modern map, well, we do see our frame rate now hovering between 150 to 180 FPS, likely due to a VRAM and graphical limitation. At the same time, this Core i7 in the system, I could imagine that this could deliver even higher frames than this if it was paired with a more competent graphics card, which is not something we often see. Most processors we test would be the limit with an RX 580, but this thing is so powerful that it had plenty more to give. So we know it can play GTA 5, we know it can play the popular Counter-Strike 2, but can it play something on Unreal Engine 5? Well, one of the most optimised titles I've seen come out on Unreal Engine 5 is Arc Raiders, and with the game set to high settings and low textures, in a 1080p resolution, things were a little bit wonky at first, so I did implement a 60 FPS cap on the system. You gotta remember, this isn't really ideal for any of the components in this PC because, well, I mean, you've seen it set up, it's not a great setup. But we did return 60 FPS on average, with 1% lows down to 50 FPS. Fortunately, even with our 4GB of VRAM, we were able to enjoy some of the nicer effects turned on, even if it meant we weren't able to enjoy higher quality textures. But at the same time, the effects in this game are quite nice. We didn't have to rely on FSR. This is just a pure native 1080p image in a popular new title out, and we're playing it perfectly fine on a 45 quid junk setup off eBay. On the other end of the Unreal Engine 5 spectrum, we have Oblivion Remastered, which at higher settings can look absolutely lovely. The problem is, when you're dealing with older pieces of hardware, well, you can run into a few problems, especially if you've only got 4GB of VRAM. I do have to give the Core i7 credit here. Usually every time I want to test Oblivion Remastered, I'm sat around waiting for around half an hour waiting for shaders to compile, but this thing, well, it's quick. It was done compiling shaders in under 5 minutes, which for me, I'd say that's good enough. It also wasn't the limit in any way in this system. It was purely down to that VRAM bottleneck, because we had to run the game with low settings and FXAA, which, to be fair, FXAA is actually one of the least blurry options of anti-aliasing available in this, at a 720p native image. Some people will be crying out saying, why are you not using FSR or an implementation like that? It uses more VRAM. We end up with worse performance and arguably worse visuals in some places, with lots of ghosting, so this was our best option, aiming for 30 FPS and 720p with low options and screen space reflections. It was playable, but let's be honest, that's quite a stark contrast to everything else we've seen so far. One of my personal favourite benchmarks, genuinely I do really enjoy benchmarking Cyberpunk because it is a surprisingly well optimised game these days. With medium and high options and low textures enabled, even on our £45 janky setup, we returned 38 FPS on average, with 1% lows down to 31 FPS, and this is taken from actual gameplay, not the built-in benchmark, which indicated we'd be seeing near 60 FPS in certain places, but in real-world gameplay, it's not going to be happening on a setup like this, at least not with that RX 580 and these settings we're using. At the end of the day, it looked great. I've said at the end of the day quite a few times now because I was benchmarking at the end of the day, so I do apologise for that because I've just noticed myself, but at the same time, you can see the performance on screen, even with lots of action, lots going on, lots of just everything, it ran perfectly fine, which I wasn't expecting, especially given the price of these components. Next up we have BeamNG running with high options enabled and medium textures, with also the traffic enabled on the jungle map, which is usually where we do most of our benchmarks because it is one of the most intensive situations. It must be said the traffic wasn't too much of a problem for our processor, but once again the 4GB of VRAM on that RX 580, well, it fills it up with a few more models and definitely does tank the performance in certain instances, but we were still able to manage it. The game did look absolutely excellent and returned us 49 FPS on average with 1% lows down to 40 FPS, all in a nice 1080p resolution. Really, it was only heavy foliage that bring you down close to the 40 FPS mark, as when you were in quieter areas and just driving along the road, you could see anywhere from 45 to 60 FPS. So BeamNG not a problem for the processor, but the RX 580, well, the VRAM's hitting it before the actual power of the card is. Mount & Blade Bannerlord is one of the best games to just click default on and it will choose the best possible graphics options for you. It defaulted to high settings in 1080p and that included high textures. This also includes a high battle size, which really I thought was going to be too much for the 4GB of VRAM on the RX 580, and that's going off all previous benchmarks where that seems to be our main limit. But it worked fine. Throughout the built-in benchmark, which is very reminiscent of the late game, we saw an average of 82 FPS, with 1% lows down to 59 FPS. So Mount & Blade Bannerlord, not really a problem whatsoever. I wasn't expecting it to be, given how well it deals with AMD graphics cards, and let's be honest, we've seen our processor deal with all of these fine at this point. So yeah, £45 you can nearly max out Mount & Blade Bannerlord and enjoy it through to the late game. PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds defaulted to medium options with DirectX 11.1, and given this isn't really an in-depth benchmark of any of the components in this system, I thought, you know what, fair enough, we'll see how it runs like that. With a 1080p resolution, we returned 88 FPS on average, with 1% lows down to 61 FPS. Once again, in standard PUBG fashion on your first game, if this is your first run with this current graphics card, it will be a bit stuttery while it's dealing with shaders and bits and pieces like that, but this would quickly go away. Honestly, I played through a decent chunk of a game and was doing surprisingly well, so it seems that PUBG, once a game that would pretty much run on absolutely nothing, seems to run perfectly fine even on our janky setup. Honestly, this kind of makes sense for PUBG. For such a janky game, it likes running on a janky pile of parts on the corner of a desk. I did want to try and stress out the processor to some degree. I have no idea what's happened to City Skylines across the years. I really should replace it with a different City Builder benchmark, probably City Skylines 2 to be honest, because this game runs downright terribly. This was one of our, I wouldn't call it the worst results because we're still running in high settings with 1080p, but we still only returned an average of 34 FPS, with 1% lows down to 24 FPS. So it was a tad stuttery in places, it didn't look particularly fantastic, but this game never really does. It's just the performance here is, well, quite underwhelming when we're not even running a particularly strenuous city. Let's be honest, our processor should be more than enough to deal with this, and even the RX 580 with just 4GB of VRAM should be fine, but lowering the settings doesn't really do anything, changing the speed doesn't really do anything because we've got plenty of processor overhead. I think City Skylines at this point is just a bit of a mess that doesn't really qualify as a benchmark, it's just a stress test. But finally, Can it run Crysis Remastered? Well, this result is taken from our usual benchmark scene, but that doesn't change the fact that I will always complain about having to play through the entire beginning segment to get to this point, but the game was not exactly playable with high options enabled. Through a mixture of medium and high options though in a 1080p resolution, we managed to retain quite a few of the high effects, which at least looks pretty good, but brought our VRAM usage down low enough that we were at least able to achieve a stable enough frame rate. We returned 38 FPS, with 1% lows down to 32 FPS, with some rather stunning visuals. So yes, our £45 box of junk X99 parts can actually run Crysis Remastered surprisingly well. This isn't something I was expecting to be playable on our bundle of parts sort of videos for quite a few years now, but fortunately we got quite lucky here, and it does appear that we can return really quality visuals on what is, to most people, genuinely just junk. So, overall performance of our cheap X99 bundle. Well, the Core i7, we are definitely going to have to look at that in its own video, because I don't think it's struggled once, even during intensive situations like city skylines on maximum speed, BeamNG with the traffic on, even a large battle in Mountain Blade Bannerlord. It just wasn't struggling, it was fine. Counter-Strike 2 even, we were seeing hundreds of frames per second, and our limit was not the Core i7. A lot of these results are limited by the RX 580 and the jank of this overall setup. None of these results are really indicative though of the Core i7 5820K or the RX 584GB because, well, I've not exactly optimised most titles down to how they should be running. I've just got them in a state where, you know what, we're actually aiming for a playable frame rate that looks smooth enough with decent enough visuals. I mean, really, everything up until bloated games like Oblivion Remastered are playable with 1080p, high settings and no problems. Yes, you will have to compromise on textures from time to time, but you've got a 4GB graphics card, that's sort of to be expected. So yeah, pretty much everything up until the latest and greatest Unreal Engine 5 messes, well, they work perfectly okay on what is a £45 bundle. This has been some of the best gaming experiences we've had, and it's been on something that cost us next to nothing. I mean, really, the price I paid on a 980 Ti would have got you this entire setup here. So I can't really fault it. Yes, it's a bit of a mess. Yes, it's a bit janky. Yes, a lot of the games could have used some more tweaking. But at the same time, as an out-of-the-box experience, it's been pretty solid. There really is no point doing a deep dive analysis into power consumption, the thermals, or anything like that, because this is not an optimal setup. I mean, we've done a little bit of tweaking with Spectrum Meltdown, increasing the turbo clocks and bits and pieces like this, but once again, we don't even have a real X99 cooler. I don't have one on hand. I've just gone with, this is good enough and this will work. So in terms of some extras we can touch on, well, the RX 580 drivers are solid. Thermals across the board, our processor was in and around 50 to 60 degrees, our graphics card under full load was in and around the low 70s, but this was with an Undervolt, and this Sapphire cooler is absolutely fantastic. Honestly, probably one of the best RX coolers that I've actually come across. So everything like that works on it. I suppose if it comes to media tasks, well, you've got AMD VCE on there. You could actually get away with just doing straight up X264 given how much processing power you've got left over. I went ahead and did a recording test of Black Mesa running at ultra settings, so that's putting plenty of load on the first two cores of the processor, it's putting plenty of load on the graphics card, and of course we are using the graphics card with VCE for recording. And it returned us decent enough visuals. There's not really much else to say about it. I mean, one of my main gripes with the system is the overall post time. It takes forever to post on this system, which is one of the reasons why I didn't want to tweak it around much more than we've done today. One, it wouldn't really be relevant, and two, well, it would have just been frustrating to do so. Now, there are going to be a group of people that really want to see this jank running Linux, and to be fair, I can't fault you, because when it comes to a setup like this that we've got for £45, it's sort of quite an optimal Linux setup. We've got a decent 6 Intel cores that are running on Ring Bus, which is something that I've not even spoken about, but not really too relevant today, and we do have the RX 580 graphics card, which of course receives even better drivers over on Linux, so may even offer us extra performance. So what I've gone through and done is I have loaded Linux onto this system, and I've done a small live segment where we get it installed, get it running, get a distro on there, just see how it's running, and also do do a little bit of gaming. It's not the most comprehensive segment in the world, but then again, this video is not a video that I ever thought would make it past the testing stages. So to be able to get this far into this, and then be able to test Linux as well, this is just a nice added bonus. Well, so far, over on Windows, for what is such a janky setup, it works fine. I mean, we've managed to get rid of most of the quirks, we've got it relatively stable, it's not crashed at all, but there is of course something people are going to want to see, which is Linux testing. Now, I'm not going to do anything all too comprehensive today because I do want to test the i7 and the RX graphics card as their own individual videos. This one probably a small one, but the i7 definitely deserves some real coverage because that hasn't struggled at all today. And seeing as the bulk of this is that i7 setup with a nice RX bonus card thrown in, well, I can't really argue with it. But being X99, we do get an M2 port. And I found a spare M2 SSD, actually a 500GB Western Digital one. So what I want to do is get this turned off, and then I want to see what this will do if we put Linux on here via an M2 drive. So I'm just going to unplug the SSD. I want to keep this on hand because having a setup Windows 10 SSD is really quite useful. But over here, tucked around the back, can't really see it. I'm sure I'll throw in some B-roll if I remember to shoot some. We have an actual M2 slot. So if we tuck that down in there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in our Linux install. This is just a Bazzite image. Some people are going to complain. It doesn't matter what distro I pick. Everyone always complains all the time. But that is the world of Linux for you. So, hey, it's Polaris. The average person running a Polaris setup is probably going to be running Bazzite. Okay, nothing to worry about, just a cable. But we should be able to go into the BIOS. I don't have to disconnect all my capture card setup because it's quite nice being able to leave it in place. So what do we got here? It has recognised the M2 SSD, it's got a copy of Windows already on it, but the only thing we want to boot from is our Bazzite install. So if we go to mass storage device, right, can you just give us the installer? But honestly, so far my X99 experience, after it mysteriously decided it wants to actually be compatible with RAM again, has been quite simple, quite nice. I've not really got any complaints with it. I mean, for 40 quid or 45 pounds, you can't really argue too much with what you're getting here. I do think with an actual cooling solution, you could do some really nice overclocking. To be fair, the old AMD Wraith cooler just sat on top has done a good enough job. Right, I am going to have to actually unplug the capture card and connect this all. Oh, yeah, I am going to connect it all up properly because I can't see where it's trying to boot from. Well, would you look at that? Doesn't Bazzite look different? I don't know why. It just wouldn't install. It would start installing if I was using a SATA drive, but then it would fail on something else. It just wouldn't install to the NVMe drive. Honestly, I'm sure I can get Linux installed on here, probably newer versions like Bazzite, but I couldn't be bothered to be honest. So we're running Elementary OS, I can bring up Terminal, someone will complain, but at the end of the day, I've had really good experiences, especially with AMD cards, and even Intel cards to be honest, while using Elementary OS. It can be a bit buggy on the install, but once you get it on here, it's absolutely fine. So we run NeoFetch. As we can see here, we've got Elementary OS, we've got the i7 5820K, 12 threads at 3.6 GHz, and the RX, it's there, RX 580, 4GB version, not really the end of the world. Yeah, we've pretty much got absolutely everything we need installed. I know off the top of my head that people are saying NVMe on these is buggy, and that is a bit of an older memory from back in the day when I remember hearing people discuss X99. Apparently it's something they fixed on the Chinese boards and BIOS updates were meant to fix it here, but it's one of those weird ones where you could have a good time, you could have a bad time. For me personally, it's been working okay. It's worked well enough. We'll just get a couple of bits and pieces installed. At the moment I've just gone with the standard BeamNG, GTA 5, MasterChef Collection, and a bit of RimWorld, which seems to be our fairly standard Linux test suite, but I'm going to let these download and update. I might add a couple to queue up overnight, but yeah, the Linux experience on here has been absolutely fine. It's speedy. It was already speedy on Windows 10, but of course Linux is more lightweight. With the Polaris card we get perfect AMD GPU drivers, which work perfectly. If you wanted to go on something like buying something, I mean, what, if you want to buy a Porsche 924, well, it's speedy enough that it'll tell you all about it, so you know what, I'm relatively happy with that. it's been an easy setup for Linux now that we went with something that wasn't Bazzite. I don't know, someone's going to have to tell me, what is the distro of choice at the moment? Because when I've tested CatchOS, people have told me that's wrong. When I test Bazzite, people tell me it's wrong. When I test Elementary OS, people tell me it's wrong. The only one that people didn't complain about was Lubuntu. And that was because we were running it on, was that the Core 2 quad? And it wouldn't run anything else? I can't even remember what PC it was. I think at the end of the day, for me, I just choose a distro that I know will work, get the drivers set up properly, and I haven't noticed a great deal of performance deficit on most of the hardware I'm testing. You're forgetting, I'm not testing new stuff. I'm testing this abomination. If it boots and runs it, that's good enough. We will test these parts properly in their own individual videos. Honestly, it's all going pretty good here. Now I really do want to quickfire my way through these benchmarks, but GTA 5 Enhanced Edition here is actually running better than it did over on Windows. We're running the exact same settings, which is pretty much the game set to Ultra, but with the textures set to high. And once again, it goes to show a setup like this, sort of ideal for Linux. You've got 6 cores, which is more than enough to deal with the overhead of running Proton and bits and pieces like that. We've got the RX 580, which of course is running the excellent Linux side drivers, and performance is, well, absolutely fantastic. I mean, at the moment we're getting anywhere in and around 60 to 70 FPS, the occasional drop down to the mid 50s, which isn't unheard of. It's feeling a lot smoother. So yeah, I'm going to say GTA 5 Enhanced Edition, excellent over on Linux, and for a cheap set of parts for £45, if anything, this is an ideal Linux setup compared to what it is over on Windows. So why don't we move on to something else? As always, BeamNG is very heavily requested as a benchmark, and we have it here running with the exact same settings that we were running over on Windows, and performance is very, very similar. We are using slightly more VRAM here, which is something that does tend to happen over on Linux. I'm not too sure why. I'd imagine it is just purely how the system deals with RAM overflows, bits and pieces like that, but at this stage I am just waffling. But BeamNG, generally we're running the exact same high settings, the high preset, which is a mixture of high and ultra, I believe, and it's working absolutely fine. The processor's got plenty of headroom, the graphics card is dealing with this with no problems whatsoever, really, and we're pretty much seeing a very solid frame rate. If anything, once again, frame times do appear to be smoother, but then again, that could be down to absolutely anything. It was pretty smooth over on Windows, to be honest. But yeah, the RX 580, even the 4GB version, does deal with Linux really rather well. It's got better drivers over here, and despite needing more VRAM really, yeah, not really any problems with BeamNG. So BeamNG, absolutely fine. Honestly, this one always seems to be the most requested and most popular Linux benchmark, which is me testing Halo, and I do agree the novelty of it is always fantastic. Once again, there are no problems with it on a system like this. This is probably the smoothest I've seen it run on Linux, but to be fair, it's always run pretty much fantastic for me every time I've tried. So this is it running with the highest options enabled, which is where the game is set to enhanced mode. So what you're getting is a few extra nice effects and a couple of extra bits at higher resolution, but really it's still an Xbox 360 game. But our graphics card is having to do very little. It's in and around 30 to 60%. Our processor is hovering between 25 and 50%, and we are pretty much dropping no frames whatsoever. So yeah, when it comes to running Halo and bits and pieces like that, honestly, if it comes to running absolutely anything, this system runs Linux perfectly. So I know it's only a little bit of basic testing, but we'll probably be covering these components in their own rights, and I know I'll probably do some Linux testing on the processor. Hopefully I will on the graphics card as well if I actually get a proper setup together. But as it stands, this is running perfectly. I have no complaints about this whatsoever, so there you go. Linux side gaming, no problems whatsoever. It runs everything I've tested. You're going to be having a great time. So, yep, not that I was really planning on doing comprehensive testing, but it works great for what I've tested on it. So there we have it, our cheap Intel X99 gaming bundle. And to be fair, I am going to be the first person to say that we got lucky here. This was spares and repairs, and lots of X99 boards you see over on eBay, Gumtree, Facebook Marketplace, anywhere like that that is listed spares or repairs, there's likely a reason for it. These were enthusiast boards that were pushed very hard and very far with overclocking, and there's a reason why the main way to get into X99 these days are the cheaper Chinese boards, which I have one in the cupboard and we will be touching on it. So don't worry, there is definitely plans for that in the future. So, as it stands at the moment, yes, we took a massive risk today, but there was a massive reward. As I said, there's plenty of videos I've filmed that never make it past the first, maybe an hour of filming, where we just can't get them working, and I do troubleshooting and it just doesn't get us anywhere. But this is one of those rare instances where we took those massive risks, and we got something out of it. We have got an X99 board that will work with its own Core i7 it came with, we've got a 4GB RX 580, and we'll be taking a proper look at this on the channel in the future weeks, probably this month. Anyway, thank you all very much for watching. I hope you've all enjoyed this video. It's one of the more troubleshooting heavier videos that I've got on the channel, because people have been asking for a bit more of the nitty-gritty, order something that's just a complete mess and make it work. And surprisingly, we have actually managed to do that. So thank you all very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I've enjoyed it because I've actually got some bargains out of it. And yeah, it's all gone pretty smoothly. So thank you all very much for watching, and good night.